Thank you very much. Well, good evening, everybody. This is the Wednesday, April 23rd, 2025 meeting of the Somerville Community Preservation Committee. I'm Ryan Kirchhoff, the chair. Roberta, could you please call the roll?
Yes, so we have David Turin,
Here.
Michael McNally,
Here.
Heather Highmark, I do not see here yet. We'll see if she arrives in a little bit. John Broninkent,
Here.
Mary Jo Bohart, I likewise don't see yet. And Carlos Ayala,
Here.
Eric Parks,
I'm here.
and Ryan Kirchhoff.
Present. Thank you very much. I'm going out of order, but now I'm going to inform everyone that pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2025, this meeting of the Somerville Community Preservation Committee will be conducted via remote participation. We will have a video recording available upon request as soon as possible after this meeting. Okay, looking at the agenda for tonight, I don't think we had a review of draft meeting minutes on there, but I'll go ahead and open it up to the group. Any comments or questions about the draft meeting minutes that were circulated in the meeting packet? Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve the minutes as drafted?
I'll make that motion.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Roberta, please call the roll.
Right. John,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Ryan,
Yes.
Michael,
Aye.
Carlos,
Yes.
and David.
Sorry, yes.
Great. The motion is approved, and I see Heather just joining us. Sorry. Then go ahead.
Okay, and so the first item on our agenda is an off-cycle funding request for the Kennedy Schoolyard design. Roberta, is anyone on to discuss this, or did you want to kick us off in this discussion?
I will invite John to introduce this item.
Thank you very much. So I prepared some talking notes just because I'm getting over a little bit of a cold and just wanted to make sure I'm hitting all of my talking points. So let me dive into this. So good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you tonight. So I'm here on behalf of the Public Space and Urban Forestry Department to request an additional $200,000 in CPA funding to support the design and construction administration phases of the Kennedy School Playground redevelopment. So this project focuses on transforming the front schoolyard at the Kennedy School located on Elm and Cherry Street into a vibrant, inclusive, and multifunctional community space. What's currently one of the most underdeveloped schoolyards in the city, mostly cracked asphalt with limited recreational features, will become a welcoming and accessible green space that serves both the school and surrounding neighborhood. So previously, the CPC generously awarded us with $100,000 in CPA funds to begin the design efforts. Now, after a lot of coordination with the school departments, engineering, mobility, and our own public space and urban forestry department, it's become really clear that we need a more holistic and ambitious approach to meet the community's needs for this space. With rising design costs and expanded project goals, including a redesign of the parking lot and bus drop-off to make more room for trees, bike parking, and hopefully up to 25% more recreational space, we're asking for that additional $200,000 in CPA support. This will close our funding gap and allow us to move forward with finalizing the design contracts that are currently on hold. Our goals aren't just replacing old play equipment. This will be a model project, just like the CPA-funded Healy School Playground. This space will feature age-appropriate inclusive play structures, natural play elements, and shade trees, outdoor classrooms, and quiet zones for self-regulation, universally accessible pathways and play features, and space for both structured and unstructured play. Importantly, this space will serve not just the Kennedy School students during the day, but the broader community on evenings, weekends, and during the summer months when school is on recess. We've already received 5 applications in response to our RFQ and are ready to contract with a firm. But until this final piece of funding is in place, we're kind of in a holding pattern, and we can't proceed without all of our funding in hand. So we understand that securing additional grants is really challenging with schoolyards, especially the restriction around long-term land use on school properties. So we can't apply for grants like park grants or other federal grants because they require that the space is dedicated in perpetuity. And we can't do that on our schoolyards just for future development of our schools and future planning. PSEF doesn't have the authority to dedicate that space in perpetuity. So this kind of prohibits us from applying to a lot of grants. And that's why CPA funding is critical. It allows us to make these transformative investments while maintaining the flexibility needed for schools' future planning. So, you know, we're very deeply committed to equity, community engagement, and sustainability in this project. And with your support, we can deliver a space that truly reflects on the priorities of the students, family, and the greater neighborhood. With that, I have submitted a formal application. There's some funding and budget information that I'm happy to go over and answer any other questions that you may have.
John, I would appreciate it if you went over the budget a little bit.
Yeah, of course. So give me 1 second, I can pull up.
Here, I can share it.
Just, but you beat me to it. So just a little bit of background, because we are still in the contracting phase of this RFQ, I can't specifically name applicants. I can only discuss what's publicly available, which says that we've received 5 applications for this project. And they are kind of ranging in price from $300,000 to upwards of $450,000 for this work. So what you can see on the screen is a breakout of what we expect the cost to be with our preferred firm that's applying. We are currently in negotiations with them to try and reduce the budget on this. We think that we can successfully get it down, but just for safety's sake in the CPA application, I assume the worst case, and that we're accepting the proposal exactly as they proposed it. So we can see that in their proposal, they have about $50,000 for their site analysis and schematic design. Then they allocate $125,000 for their design development and construction documents. Then there's $5,000 for bid and negotiation. This is when we put the project up to bid and have to work with contractors, answer any additional questions. So they're just there to provide support during that short process. And then another big chunk of this project is the construction administration. And this is something that we want to tie in with the design process because it kind of locks us in with this price, and with constant escalating prices, we're concerned that the construction administration could dramatically balloon. So locking it in at this $95,000 price would be wonderful. And then just at the bottom, we're including a $25,000 design contingency just for increases in costs if the designer does anything above and beyond the scope of the project.
And what are the engineering components? You have a civil, you have a traffic engineer. I mean, how many?
Yeah, so the main, there's a few proposals that do it differently, but the main structure of it is we'll have the main landscape architect who will have a number of sub-consultants one of the required sub-consultants is a civil and traffic engineer, who is crucial for that parking lot and bus reconfiguration piece of the design, as well as any stormwater infrastructure, any green infrastructure that we want to do within the play space itself. And so they're carrying that. They're also carrying a lighting designer as well as an irrigation designer. And then some of them also include something called a CPSI. I'm forgetting the full acronym, but it's a playground safety inspector pretty much. And they'll be able to assist with the complexities of a universal playground. So some of the firms also included a CPSI. Some of the firms are CPSI certified, so they didn't need that sub-consultant.
And structural is in there?
Structural is within that civil engineering, civil structural traffic. They kind of cover that whole umbrella.
Okay.
John, if you don't mind, I was going to ask a quick question. I know you mentioned that the Healy project, when that school playground was renovated, I was just wondering, do you have access to like around how much was given for that project, and how does that compare to this one?
I don't know off the top of my head. I know some rough budgets, but I wonder if Roberta might be able to assist with those numbers.
That might actually be in the project status table that I added to the meeting packet this afternoon. I'm looking at that right now. Healy schoolyard design was originally $80,000, and that was in FY17. So it's comparable to what the original request had been for the Kennedy School. But I think that the requirements for projects like this have increased. And I also know that the city put a lot of funding from other sources into the Healy schoolyard design because not all of it was eligible for CPA funding. So to complete that design project, they needed to add funding from other sources.
Well, and
Um,
I think that aspect of the Healy playground design was just the younger kids' playground area and not the big sports field and the back of the Healy design.
So
It's a larger
the
design project.
actually, no, the CPA funded the design of the rear portion of the playground and design and construction of the tot lot at the side of the school. So that was a separate project.
Okay, and so then that one you're referencing now was the more integrated multi-use area and back. Okay.
Yeah. But what I don't have might be something that I could find if I dig it up, but I'm not sure if the data is available. What the total design cost of the rear playground was, because as I said, CPA only covered a portion of it, not 100% of the cost.
Right. That is, I don't have those numbers, but I do know it's kind of just a piece of the whole pie, if you say. One thing that I did want to stress also is that over the past few years, we've been really relying on ARPA funds to help with a lot of our design and construction projects. But now that ARPA is pretty much dried up, and us kind of going into a more fiscally conservative mindset, with development projects kind of slowing and us having less revenue in the city, we're relying heavily on the CPA to help move some of these projects through during these harder times, especially these projects where we can't get grant funding for it because of the restriction of space. That's why in the past, like 5 years, we've seen so much construction with so many park spaces. It's because we've had this kind of free cash from ARPA to spend through all these different spaces. And now that ARPA funding is drying up, and that was a large chunk of the past few projects we've done.
Thanks for the additional clarity, John. I really appreciate that. don't get me wrong, I feel like this is a great project, very necessary. And I'm just curious, and I think you really answered that, but I was wondering, like, where have we gotten the funds in the past outside of like the CPA? And have we like really, tapped into those resources right now? But it seems like you very much have, and this is pretty much, yeah, okay. Well,
Yes,
yeah.
I have. And I would say the main point that I'm trying to tap into resources right now is to try and negotiate contracts. And I'm very hopeful that we can get the contract down to about $225,000. And then we would happily return any of the additional funds back to the CPA. But at the time of doing this application, and where I'm at right now, we haven't finished those negotiations. So I can't for certain say what the price, if we're gonna reduce the price by $50,000 or not.
I have a couple questions. If
course.
That's okay. First, kind of following up on Carlos's question about other funding sources. I understood you're saying that you couldn't apply to certain block, grants because of, not being able to put, I guess essentially deed restrictions on the parcel. But what did the city do in Healy to get around that if we didn't provide all the funding? Like how did you manage it then? So that's kind of one component of my question. Another component is just to clarify, this is just design work or is this design and construction?
This is design and construction administration.
Design and construction administration, but does that include construction? I'm confused.
Does not include construction. We are currently requesting through the capital project. We're requesting.
I'm sorry, John, I couldn't hear you. You kind of broke up.
Sorry, I think I cut out for a second. Can you all hear me now? Okay. Through our bonding, we're trying to request $2.6 million for construction. And that would be through the city's actual GO bonds.
My signal is bad. I'm sorry. I don't know if it's me or you, but you're breaking up a lot for me. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah,
I hear both of you very clearly.
yeah, it might be you, David. Sorry.
Okay. Maybe I'll try and I think I'm going to log off and try. I was trying to do this on a laptop. I'll go back to my main computer.
Okay.
I'll be back.
We'll return to those questions in a minute.
John, is this the same project as the annual report updates that we have in the separate folder?
Sorry, what was your question?
Is this the exact same project as the Kennedy School renovation that's in the annual reports folder?
Yes.
Okay. So in that annual report, it talked about there being a total budget of $130,000, not $100,000. Can you explain the $30,000 and where that came from?
Yep. So we have $30,000 remaining in the public space and urban forestries. I call it P&T. What is it called? Professional and technical services that we were that we can use with some discretionary to move around. So to make this project seem more substantive for a firm to apply, we added that additional $30,000 in the scope of the project when we put the project out for the RFQ. So we had this additional $30,000 in our P&T that we need to use by the end of this fiscal year. So
is it possible that $30,000 could reappear and maybe lower the ask here to be 170 instead of 200,000?
I believe so, but I would have to just check with my finance team.
Okay. I don't want to be too pushy. Just want to be protective of the funds
Of
we've
course.
got, right? It also talks about this being a leverage funding opportunity. So, this extra $200,000 can complete the design and construction oversight work, which will allow you to do a maybe $3 million project. It's $3 million in the annual report. It's 2.6 in the request you have here. Can you kind of explain that $400,000 discrepancy?
Yes. So doing these applications as we're currently working through the RFQ and asking for city funds and negotiating these funds. The final amount has kind of shifted around a few times. We have set on the $2.6 million as the ask. But yeah, we were kind of jumping around a little bit, and I do apologize because I did realize as I was filling out that report, I was like, we're in a very crucial time where we're potentially about to select a designer and receiving all these applications. So I felt like every week that or day that I waited to write that report, it could have been dramatically different, just as things were kind of evolving.
All good. You saved $400,000 right there. That was excellent. No, in seriousness though, like first off, at a meta level, I'd like to signal that I, as one member, am excited about off-cycle requests. I think these are great. I think they're a really good way to help problem solve some of these projects that last minute have these major adjustments. Like you said, even just between writing these two documents, there's been a $400,000 change in budget. And so I like being able to feel the pulse of things as we get the latest and greatest information. So thank you for applying with this. Second, I also could understand that someone in the city could look at a project like a park as a luxury at this point in time, especially when there's so much noise around bike lanes and things that I am very supportive of personally, but I could easily see parks and children's parks in particular suffering because of that. So I'm very excited about this project. I hope my comments weren't necessarily pushing against that. But with that, positive, upbeat note, I just want to ask one maybe tough point and ask, would you be willing to potentially, I don't know if it's slow the design work, but maybe find a way to limit the amount of money that the CPC is paying you until you have surety from the city to proceed with that 2.6 million? Is there a way that we can kind of stage gate the funding a little bit?
In contract negotiations, we might be able to parse out the contract so we accept the construction administration once the project goes out to bid. But technically for us, we need to have the full pot of money in our hand to sign the contract. It's kind of just like a legal thing. But then, yes, we could decline that and return the money. And obviously, because Roberta, please clarify me if I speak incorrectly, but because this is a city-run project, we're not technically pulling out the money right away to pay for the project. So we're technically like not losing interest on our money until I actually like rack up the work with purchasing and like commit to actually like doing that chunk of work.
Okay. Yeah, I'm definitely not trying to play funding arbitrage here and play the interest markets or anything like that. I just want to make sure that if we're putting out that $200,000 additional on top of the $100,000, that the project's going to go through and the city last minute won't be like, hey, we just don't have the budget for this. So I want to make sure these funds are worth it, basically.
Right. Yeah. I think the main assurances would be if the city at any point said we can't do this at all, and there's no way that we're going to do this in the next 5 to 10 years, then we would just terminate the contract at that point and pay whatever we had to pay and close out the contract and refund everything else. But I don't really expect that. And the great thing with these landscape drawings is we have had projects that Dilboy is a great example of that have sat on the shelf for about 5 years, and then we picked them back off the shelf and we proceeded with the work just fine with it. And it was actually a lot cheaper for us because we designed that field in 2018 when it was a lot more affordable for designers and didn't have to pay all these expensive fees that we do now.
Yeah, that's a really helpful anecdote. I still am a little bit worried that there could be material changes and views about projects like these if there were, say a change in administration or massive changes in code or things like that. So I do still want to think hard about this, but it's great to hear that we've had this situation happen a couple of times and those design funds were well worth it.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I got. Thanks for all your time.
Of course.
Thanks, Michael.
Yeah, I also wanted to ask John if it's okay, if you are to receive the CPA funds and they're approved, what does the timeline look like when it comes to like breaking ground?
Breaking ground would depend heavily on budget. We would really hope to break ground next, well, whenever school's out. So the second week of June in 2026. But that's heavily dependent on funding. For design, I can't speak more to that because we do have the design timeline a little bit more solidified. We're looking to do 2 sets of meetings, kind of in short succession of each other to really engage community before they go out for summer break. We're going to let the designer kind of spend some time really reviewing these things. And then in September, we're going to have 1 to 2 more sets of meetings. And by sets, I mean, we're going to be meeting with the school community and then with the general public and kind of having like open house meetings to discuss the design, see if we have hit the mark or have missed it, and then kind of re-go out from there. And then after that, they're going to spend 2 to 3 months taking that design and putting it out into construction documents. And then at that point, we'll be able to bid. Bidding is best done in the early winter. That's when contractors are kind of more inside and willing to do paperwork. And then hopefully start construction in the summer. We want to put this project out to bid as soon as possible because it's playground play features. So those products take a long time to ship and to be produced, somewhere up to 20, 30 weeks it can take. So we definitely want to get a contractor contracted and have them start ordering those products as soon as possible.
Awesome. Thank you, John. Appreciate all the clarity.
Thanks, Carlos. Any other questions or comments for John on this one?
Yeah, I kind of wanted to continue what I didn't have a chance to ask before.
Go ahead.
So in addition to kind of where I was going with the question about the other sources and the inability to kind of give other, these park grants the assurances they want that this is going to, I guess, remain open space. It's a question, I don't know if it's for John or really for Roberta. It hadn't really occurred to me that that was something that could happen after we make a substantial CPC investment in open space or recreation land, that it might become something other than that. And so I kind of wanted to kind of probe that a little bit more.
I know we've had this discussion before, and there was the comment about a repayment option. So if the city was to ever take over the playground within, I forget how many years we said, was it 20 years or something, that the city would be liable to repaying the CPA for that work. I don't really know how far we got into that conversation, but I do remember us kind of having conversations about other ways when we can't do things in perpetuity. Are there other ways that the CPA can protect their assets?
So Roberta, is that in the grants we've made or something like that?
So actually that's a fantastic question. I'm glad you raised it because as John said, this is a discussion that we've had in the past, and I just realized that I didn't create a draft recommendation letter to put in the packet today with draft conditions. So perhaps while we're having the discussion, I can quickly pull up the recommendation letter from the previous Dildboy Award, this past from a couple months ago. Because a condition that could be implemented and perhaps ought to be going forward with school projects or projects that are on land that can't be permanently protected is something that requires the repayment of CPA funds if whatever has, if that open space is dismantled within a certain period of time. So the committee can elect what is the expected lifespan of the open space asset, maybe say 50 years. And if within, or maybe 20 years, if within that period of time, the open space is eliminated, then the CPA fund should be repaid for the amount of the grant. And this actually was a question that came up because of questions around the Winter Hill School, since the Winter Hill Schoolyard is a CPA funded schoolyard, and one of the scenarios for replacement of the Winter Hill School and reconstruction of the Brown School could be the elimination of the CPA funded schoolyard. So we didn't have a requirement in place at that time, and it may be that the city will be kind enough to repay the CPA fund for that investment, but it's to be determined. That's just something to take under consideration in the future, but it has already come up once before. So it is something that I think maybe moving forward, it would behoove the CPC to consider a condition that has a clawback in those instances.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely would support that. I mean, I understand, it hadn't really occurred to me, so I guess if it was a park, then it has kind of legislative protection, that it has to be, that it has to stay a park, or it needs, legislative approval to stop being a park. But I guess the same doesn't apply to schoolyards, perhaps?
No, it doesn't, not for our schoolyards. We can't dedicate the space in perpetuity under Article 97. And we would have to, I believe, do like lot splits to specifically outline where that park is and then dedicate that in perpetuity. It's something that we can't do because the city wants that space to be flexible for future school development
Right.
projects.
So then so lacking that, then I think the clawback provision, as much as it would be nice to just presume the city, of course, would pay us back, having a clawback in the grant might be more appropriate.
And since this is something that I didn't have the foresight to discuss with PSUF in advance of tonight, puts a lot of pressure on us and perhaps on John to draft what that clawback what would be a reasonable
No, I understand.
clawback. Yeah.
And it also sounds like time is kind of the essence if you're trying to negotiate your contracts right now.
Yeah, time is under the essence, specifically so that we can start our community meetings. Just with school summer right around the corner, we really want to get them contracted and engage with the school as quickly as possible.
Do we potentially, Roberta, get a kind of another bite at the apple if we kind of voted for approval of the funding now, but then would we have some time before the money is obligated, by the city council to add language, to this effect?
Short of having a special meeting within the next week or two, I would say not. I have seen CPCs vote to recommend a project and vote on conditions on two separate meetings. But, the timeline for this, I think, would necessitate that you submit something to city council before next month.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, I've said enough, so I'm happy to hear what my co-committee members think about this.
Just to answer one of your questions, David, or I guess not answer, but to reflect on it. Although we can't use grant funds for this park specifically, we are taking our park grant. We always apply for our park grant each year and use that $500,000 for different spaces. We are taking that and spreading it on parks that maybe we were thinking about coming to the CPA for. So instead of coming to the CPA for a bunch of cool, like graphic and seal coat projects, we were thinking like maybe that could be a park project, park grant project that we can ask for $500,000 to do this all throughout our different playgrounds and play surfaces that aren't schoolyards, and instead focus our ask at the CPA specifically on the Kennedy School and our other spaces where we can't really ask other grants.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry.
David, kind of following your thread there, and especially if we're trying to make a decision quickly, I might propose a pretty aggressive estimate of the value of the term. So like maybe 50 years is a good place to put it, but then also offer in the clause that we have the ability as a committee to waive the clawback. So that way, if later on we decide 50 years was too much, the committee at that point in time could waive it. And I think this also allows us to work with the city when they do actually need to kind of reuse that space. You know, for example, when we're talking about Winter Hill, the city's in a little bit of a bind with the school system right now, and we definitely don't want to artificially create a barrier to stopping, you know, servicing students, right? So just an idea maybe to expand your thought, David.
And I very much like that idea, because one of the things I like about us having the ability to waive it is that maybe it gives the city incentive to figure out some way to mitigate the impact of converting the use. You know, so if they come in and say, well, we're going to do away with the Kennedy schoolyard, but we're going to tear down this and make it into a park, you know, I mean, you know, and that would give us some opportunity to say, you know, yes, good job, city. Where on the other hand, if they're stuck having to pay us back no matter what, they perhaps have less incentive to do that.
Great idea. I like it.
I just want to play devil's advocate. I love the idea of waiving it. One question I have would be, would renovating the new playground to become another playground in, let's say, like 20 years. Usually our playgrounds last about 15, 20 years, and then they need, especially like our playgrounds specifically, need to be renovated that frequently. Other parks, forested areas, less frequently, but playgrounds definitely need some love every 15 to 20 years. If we came in 20 years later and we had that 50-year, would we have to pay back the CPA?
No, that wouldn't be the intent. I think we'd have, but it's a good point. So I think we'd have to make clear that we're talking about a real change in use, you know, not renovations or facelift or repairs.
Right. Okay.
If I may, I just want to make a couple general comments on my end before I unfortunately do have to run here in a couple minutes. So I will unlikely be able to vote if folks are able to vote tonight, but at least I can give some perspective. So generally very in favor of the project. Thank you, John, for the detailed walkthrough of the scope changes and what's different versus the $100,000 request that had $100,000 aggregate that had come in requests before. So the things I'll highlight are, if you refer to the CPA financial worksheet that is in our meeting packet, you'll see Roberta's done a great job of framing up that if we were to approve this $200,000 incremental request, we'd be left with $90,000 odd for any other off-cycle applications the rest of this fiscal year, which, as folks know, is very little, of course. I also know we are late in the fiscal year. 2 meetings only, Roberta, right? I can't remember which month we usually take off. Is it June or is it later?
We usually take off July or August.
August. I think August.
Yeah, August. Yeah.
So we do have two meetings left in which there could conceivably be additional off-cycle applications, but it is getting late in the day, and so I'm less concerned than I would have been if this came in January, I suppose. I am in favor of the conditions discussion that you've started. I like some of the things that I just heard, David, and that Michael, you seconded, regarding, you know, potential pivots of the use down the road if it were to come to that. But I think I'll stop there and just say I'm all things considered, I'm in favor of the project, and I'll leave it up to anybody else who has comments or questions now. I'll duck out here shortly and leave you in Eric and Roberta's capable hands. So thank you.
Do you want me to wait till you leave to take over, or are we, first,
Why don't you take it from here, Eric? All good. I'll lurk for
It's
another
like
2
a
minutes.
coup. It's like a coup.
Yeah,
Peaceful.
you may not speak, Mr. Kirkland. No, I'm just kidding. I haven't really said, but I would sort of agree. You guys have really fleshed out the details about this particular thing, and I think it's definitely a worthwhile project. As the years creak by, I'm always surprised at how much things cost, but that's just the way it is. And I hate to see us become precariously low on free money to toss around if something else comes up at the last minute, but if it does, then that is what it is. And I'm not so concerned. I mean, yeah, I could see that the reason for the clawback, that's a legitimate thing to pursue. I think realistically, the odds of us demolishing the Kennedy School in the next 30 or 50 years are pretty slim, since that's one of the newer schools, the older, newer schools. So, and I'm comfortable with going ahead with this one.
I am sharing a draft letter that I've started to write, and some of you may be helpful in wordsmithing this, but I attempted to come up with a condition with a clawback requirement.
It's hypothetically, it's a change of use or just a reconfiguration of the site that necessitates the removal of what we're funding. If, for example, the school burns down or something and we decide to rebuild it, but the playground needs to be building there. I don't know if you want to qualify it that way.
Well, what I wanted to phrase it in a way that, as John just mentioned, if they are just renovating the playground equipment, that doesn't necessitate being paid back. It's if the open space is being eliminated. So it may be that in the case that the school itself is being redesigned and they retain open space but in a new configuration on the site, that might be a situation in which the committee consents to allow the city to keep the funds because they're abiding by the spirit of retaining the open space, even if not.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it is actually probably the most likely scenario, as I think about it, is that they decide, the city decides they want to completely renovate the school and reconfigure how they use the space. And there is going to be a playground, but it might be 30% smaller because they decide the school has to be, 30% bigger. And so we are going to end up probably, or not us, but our kids will end up, in a conversation about, is that equal enough, and how do we weigh that? But I think that'll be a reasonable conversation to have. I don't think we want to say, it's got to be exactly equal. But that's why I think that, with Michael's, language was just, we don't maybe need to, and the way you've written it, I think, Roberta, is good because it doesn't really say what the terms might be and what we might agree to. It just says we can choose.
I think you could say a change of use which reduces or eliminates the outdoor recreation, putting in the word which after use.
Yeah, I actually like reduces or eliminates. So they can't do it, they can't nick away at it.
Oh, now we need a debate over the word substantially, and is that?
Yeah. I just threw that in there because I'm thinking, what if they just need to add an elevator shaft to the outside of the building? Are we going to make them return the grant because we lost 10 square feet?
Yeah,
or
that's it. I want it back.
we added a handicap parking spot. Now we need to give back $300,000. So that was what made me put the
Well-
substantially in, because that's what I'm picturing happening.
Right, but
But-
we're getting that flexibility with the end of the sentence.
That's true.
You know, so we don't necessarily need to have it in the beginning, you know what I mean? Because they'll then be able to make the case to us, this isn't substantial, and we can either agree or not.
Roberta's never gonna forget to do this step again. She doesn't want to.
It's like,
Roberta, I apologize if I'm being a little bit nitpicky here. At the very end, it says if the CPC consents to allow the city, is there some more formal way of framing that? Like, does the CPC have to have a formal vote? Is this language sufficient, you think, to kind of allow us to do that? Us being the future committee? Okay.
I think that this suggests that the committee, it'll be a committee vote.
Okay, I just want to make sure we don't accidentally box the applicant in, because I do want to create the flexibility, so.
Mhm. We might use more legalese in the actual contract. But
and that's kind of what I was getting at before, is whether we get another bite at this apple, you know?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I think that if we share our, you know, our intent here, and we're clear enough about that, then, you know, then maybe lawyers can go back and forth about the right way to say it.
Yeah.
So I have to ask the question. I support the project. I am surprised by the overall ask, you know, the 300,000 to get the design done. So I understand that there's some buffer in there. Do we want to play around with that buffer and reduce the ask, or are we just gonna sort of roll with the ask so that they have that flexibility to have that money guaranteed?
Heather, are you recommending that we try to ask to reduce by the contingency amount, or are you thinking like the $30,000 that we discovered earlier, or where's your head?
Yeah, there's the 30,000, there's the contingency, there's the hope to sign the contract for 250 or 225 instead of 300. There's just, you know, it feels like there's easily even if we reduced it by 50K, that there's still some buffer in there. And part of that is that it does you know, take a big chunk out of the CPA funds, our flexible funds. And so do we really want to lock that up to that extent?
That does also get at Ryan's maybe minor concern about the budget getting a little bit thin for the next 2 months.
At what point, if there is some pencil sharpening done, does the money officially become available to us again? Let's say, John, they work out a contract in whatever, 2 weeks, and it happens to be $30,000 less. Could that, when would that become released to us?
I need some clarification from Roberta about how we do this, because normally I feel like we hold on to our funds and then just return it at the end. But if we were to dramatically reduce a contract and we have all this money sitting around, I don't see why we couldn't. But Roberta, what would the process be for returning?
So, having some institutional memory, I will bring up the story of Henry Hansen Park, where the original amount, I can't remember what the numbers are, but the original amount of the ask included what they anticipated for the design cost. And then the designer said that they could do it for $15,000 less than what had been budgeted for design. So this was early on in the CPC's history, and they immediately put that $15,000 back in the account. 4 years later, we had to come and ask for exactly $15,000 because the design budget ended up being more in the end than what they had anticipated. So because of that, seeing that happen, I always suggest that we hold on to the money. We can put it back at any time, but it saves a lot of trouble in the end if we just hold on to the money until the project is completed. And that way, because it's much easier to transfer money from one scope item to another scope item than it is to have to come back and make an off-cycle request because you need back what you had returned.
In those scenarios, do they both have to be scope items? Like there were things that we had funded, or could the city say, well, we saved 50,000 here, but now we actually want to spend $50,000 more to make it better in some way? Would they be able to keep the money and spend it for that, or would they have to come to us and say we want to reallocate this to another?
So if it's within scope that the CPC has already evaluated and approved, I don't see any problem with shifting money between one scope item and another scope item. But if they want to add a new scope item that wasn't there before, then, let's say suddenly we want to add an outdoor swimming pool to Kennedy Schoolyard that was never in what was presented to you and approved before, then you probably want that to come through the CPC. Have a public process about approving that change in scope.
Mm-hmm.
You want to just put up the budget for a moment, not the Kennedy School budget, but the scenario, the CPA scenario?
Yeah.
Please.
You are. Well, one thing that I would also consider is that although so 750,000 is the amount that the CPC elected to carry over. And maybe this year, this is a very conservative carryover, given that as of July 1, you'll have a much larger pool of money available to spend. So 750,000 represents a much smaller portion of the money that will be available as of July 1 than it would have under other circumstances. So what I had calculated was the absolute minimum level was 617,000. So perhaps there's another 150,000 or 140,000 that is potentially available if there's an off-cycle application.
So just to clarify, we have the 617, 533, and 750, and we had said we wanted to save seven, or is this?
So
is the 617
this
a portion of the 750?
What you just said.
Okay.
So this is the absolute minimum. This is your elected minimum.
Yeah. Okay. So we're already below.
No, if you fund $200,000 tonight,
Yeah.
you will still be 92,000 above the
above the
750
7. Okay.
Oh,
Above the
Yeah.
750. I misunderstood that. I thought we were somehow Okay. I was trying to make these numbers add up somehow.
Okay, so we would have more available. We would just have to go to change our guideline there that we've been operating under.
If
With the
we
minimum.
wanted to give away more than another 92,000.
Yes.
Yeah.
That makes it feel a little bit more comfortable with it. And then July 1st, how does that work structurally? But at July 1st, we suddenly have new money available for off-cycle requests that's not even reflected here.
Correct.
Okay, so this
That's when the new budget goes into effect on July 1st.
And also our increase in funding from the ballot question.
Yes,
Roberta,
exactly.
could you remind me, at what point does off-cycle become cycle? Is it the beginning of the new fiscal, which would be the July?
So the general cycle is when we go through the application process. The applications are due in, the eligibility determinations are due in July, the full applications are due in September, and so we have a cohort of applications that are considered all at the same time, and that's on cycle. So any applications that come in early or late are considered off cycle.
So the when we say off cycle, we're not talking about a different type of funding, although right now it feels like our remainder. It
Mhm.
really, after July, could be early applicants before the cycle,
Right.
rather than these right now, which are late.
But
That's what I was trying to understand.
yeah.
What makes you early versus late?
So you're coming in early if you're asking for a decision to be made before December.
So Ryan is so on a certain level, Ryan's idea that there's only 2 more months for off cycle is not quite correct, although we will get more funding starting July 1.
Right. He meant two more months for off-cycle applications within this budget that we're
in this
looking at.
fiscal year.
This fiscal year.
Yeah.
So starting July 1, you'll have a new budget and
So,
new money available.
so we could allocate FY27, I guess it is.
It'll be FY26.
FY26 money. That's why FY26 money starting July 1.
Yes,
If another off-cycle application came in.
correct.
But for one of those early off-cyclers, it would have to have some time sensitivity, right? Otherwise, you'd say get into the cycle.
Well, I think theoretically they should all have some time sensitivity.
Yeah.
It feels to me.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It should be time sensitivity that is more than just, we hadn't, we didn't apply, we weren't ready to apply in
We
time.
didn't timely apply.
So it's often because of a need to increase the budget for projects that are already approved or previously approved. And occasionally it's due to some urgent project that arises. Those are the most typical reasons for off-cycle applications. Or the third reason is because there's a grant cycle that they're trying to match, which might not align with our grant cycle, and they need a funding commitment outside of our funding cycle. That's also a reason why people have asked for off-cycle applications, off-cycle awards before. So, yeah, there's 92,000 or maybe 200,000 that are available between now and July 1 or June 30 if we receive any more off-cycle applications in the next 2 months. And then after July 1, there will be a much bigger budget available, and the concern about early applications is that it reduces the amount of money that's available for everybody who comes in on the regular cycle.
And when do we start actually collecting more tax money for property tax?
You'll see your tax bill go up the first quarter of FY26.
So is the funding that we receive in FY26 based on what we received already in 25? Or are we like preemptively spending what we expect to make in 26?
So you're preemptively spending what you expect to get in 26, but so you're preemptively committing what you expect to get in 26, but most of our money isn't actually spent as soon as it's appropriated. So we have money in our accounts that is sitting around, and that's what enables us to be able to spend or commit money as soon as as soon as the fiscal year turns over.
Okay.
We can't actually spend money that we haven't received yet, but we can commit money with the expectation that it will be received.
And
Okay.
what we're allocated will be based on, I guess, the city's projections of what the tax will bring in.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about that next month.
So I don't know if there's any other conditions we want to put on that award letter. Other than we have some boilerplate conditions that we typically use, but I feel like we're getting close to being ready for making a motion, and I'd be happy to make the motion to
Just
approve
before-
this award for the 20,000 with the conditions that the committee is drafting.
Can you remind, before we do that, can you remind me, Roberta, or us, Roberta, we were putting in that language about needing to commit the money, right, within 3 years of the grant. And then I recall that we took that out because you determined that was covered somewhere else in another document. Is that correct?
Yes, all of the boilerplates are now in the memorandum of agreement that accompanies all of the grants.
Including with the city?
So the memorandum of agreement applies to all city projects, and non-city projects have a grant agreement that is a contract with the city. So those terms, those standard terms that we were applying to each of our projects before are incorporated into the standard terms.
Yeah,
So we
okay.
don't need to have them be conditions.
Okay, yeah, I kind of vaguely recalled that we could take them out. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
Heather, did you formally make that motion?
I will formally make that motion to approve the Kennedy School for the $200,000.
Thank
I'll
you.
second.
Motion by Heather, seconded by who was that? Michael? Is that
Yep.
actually everybody would do that? I forgot the formalities in our commission.
That's quite all right. And I just want to make sure that you're all okay with the language proposed for the funding condition as well. Okay, so I will call the roll. Actually, you know what? I'm going to stop the share. That way I can see you all and then I can call the roll. John,
Yes.
Michael,
Aye.
Carlos,
Yes.
Mary Jo,
Yes.
Heather,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
and Eric.
Yes.
Right, the motion passes. Thank you very much. Thank you, John, for getting that under the wire.
Thank you all so much. I really appreciate it.
All right, let me pull up my agenda that took over. that was the off-cycle funding request. The next is the project updates from prior CPA grant cycles. And you have that nice folder full of information. Roberta, do you want to, how do you want to handle that? You just want to touch on those?
Sure, I'll touch on
Individually?
those and invite you all to ask any questions or make comments about some of the projects. I'll share the overview spreadsheet that I added. And if you have any want to bring up any specific projects, feel free. So everything that is in this spreadsheet grayed out is completed already. If it's pink, it was actually canceled. So the only of our really old projects still hanging around is the Somerville Hispanic Association. Actually, their FY17 grant was completed, but for better or for worse, I don't know if it was the best way to organize a project, and I don't know if I'll repeat this going forward. All of the subsequent grants that they received have been rolled under the original grant account. So that's the total amount that has been awarded to them to date. And so they did submit a grant report. As far as I know, the SHA for CD contractor is still awaiting approval for their building permits so that they can proceed with the project. However, this grant for the projects that they've submitted the annual report form for was matched with ARPA funding. So the ARPA funds were spent to pay for the materials and deposits to enable them to spend down the ARPA on their timeline. And then the CPA funds will be spent when they're actually able to get under construction. So the Somerville Museum, the FY22 and 23 projects have actually been completed. I'm in the process of submitting invoices to close those projects out now. But they weren't quite completed in time to gray them out and relieve them of having to submit annual reports. The Elizabeth Peabody House, I am still waiting for annual reports from them. I know that they're ready to close out the earlier project, FY22. I think they've had some staffing changes and they have some big projects that are underway this year. So their bureaucracy management is running a little bit behind schedule, but I think their projects are on schedule. And it's exciting to see the work going on in their building when you go by right now. Just to start submitted their annual report. They haven't begun the project yet. They're looking, I think, anticipating starting soon, starting this year, I hope. The City Hall clock tower is in progress right now. And the Somerville Museum is underway, the artifacts preservation from last year. And this reflects both the this amount reflects both the FY24 and FY25 grants. I combined projects in this table that have been combined. So the projects, the remaining projects are the ones that we just funded, so they haven't gone under contract yet. So that's our historic preservation projects. In the open space category, the Henry Hansen Park is in the process of being closed out, will be very soon. Likewise, Dilboy is very far along. We've just talked about the Kennedy Schoolyard. The Open Space Acquisition Fund, it's actually 800,000, but this only says 750,000 because there's 50,000 that is hanging out in the wrong place right now that we will not forget, but we can't combine it yet either. And the Glen Park Community Garden, I think is close to completion.
Yep.
They're working right now on the gate, which was a condition when the CPC approved the funding for the project. They wanted to see an artistic element added to the project, and so that's what is being worked on right now. And the Mystic River Watershed Association and 217 Somerville Avenue, we have their annual reports. And Art Farm, we haven't received their report yet, nor Somerville Junction Park.
So Vita Real is complete?
Yes, Vita
Oh.
Real. I'm looking for it on the list.
For Broadway, yeah.
Yeah, it was completed last year. But what I haven't given you, and I maybe I can follow up in next month's meeting packet when I hopefully have the outstanding annual report forms to share with you. I think that they did provide me with the report that was prepared by their consultant, the condition assessment. So I can share with you the condition assessment report.
So the money in that returned column, that
Mhm.
was money that was excess when they were done with the project that they returned to us?
Yes,
And does that just kind of seamlessly go back into our coffer?
yes. Yeah, I need to, I don't put, like, I have to take an action for those funds to be returned. They could sit indefinitely in those project accounts if I
Mhm.
don't tell them to put it back. So I always wait to tell them to put it back when when I hear in writing from the project manager, we're done, no
Right.
more, you can put it back.
Right, kind of going back to your anecdote from before.
Yeah.
So it goes back to the coffers, David, but it goes back earmarked within the category in which it was awarded. So historic preservation goes to
Right,
historic preservation. So even if it was coming from an undesignated fund, it would then be recharacterized as whatever we awarded it as.
Oh, it does? It doesn't, so if we took uncharacterized and gave it to open space and then they return it, it stays, it's open space money, is that correct?
That's my understanding. Roberta, can you confirm that?
I would actually need to confirm that. I'm not 100% certain that happens. They do ask me to be very specific about where money is coming from when we make an appropriation, and they may track it back to where it came from should the project close out, but I'm not sure that we've had a situation. So actually, now I'm thinking through this as I speak. They have requested, so if it comes from the budgeted reserve, I think it might close back out to undesignated fund because the budgeted reserve rolls over into the undesignated fund in the future. But if I take it out of the undesignated fund, they require that we put it into one of the reserves before it's appropriated. So that would go back to that reserve.
So there's to kind of maybe try and put, so I can wrap my mind around this. The Kennedy one that we just approved.
Yeah.
The first 100,000 came from open space and recreation?
Actually, I can show you. I keep
Well,
track of that.
Let's
on
let's
this.
say just for hypothetical, that the first 100,000 came from the open space fund. This 200,000 today, that came from undesignated?
So this came from undesignated. So in order for me to put this to take it out of undesignated, I'm going to put it into open space and then appropriate it from open space. So
Mhm.
it's going to remain permanently in open space.
Okay.
But previously, which project was this one?
And
Dillboy.
in
This,
fact,
so
when,
it,
and I'm sorry, I was gonna say, in fact, when we voted on it, I should have said, we've done this in the past where we phrased it as I make the motion to move X amount of dollars
Oh, that's
from
right.
undesignated into blah, blah, blah.
Right. You've had us do two
And,
votes. Yeah.
and then we vote.
yeah, I'm glad you remember that because I myself was scratching my head about how am I supposed to do this. So I didn't ask you to take two votes, but I was going to submit two items to city council. And in fact, maybe it would have been better for me to ask you to take two votes tonight so that you put this into the open space reserve and then from the open space reserve into this project.
Yeah. I think
But
it's Eric's fault.
I take it.
But just
Feeling.
to go back to like answer the question like in from another angle, Dillboy was funded partly out of the undesignated fund and partly out of the budgeted reserve. So should some of the money be put back? I think it will go proportionally. And that will be extremely complicated for us to figure out in the finance division how to put the money back proportionally split between the open space reserve and the budgeted reserve,
That's
which
because
would
that's
be,
just what I was just wondering is like,
yeah.
100 came from one pot and 200 came from another and they returned 50. Like, how do you know which dollar they didn't spend?
Yeah, that is a puzzle for us to figure out down the
But the
road.
proportional
We could
makes,
put it in our conditions, couldn't we? Any return funds will go return to undesignated or
Well,
something. I mean,
well, I don't really want to. I mean, I think it should return to what we, well, I don't know. I mean, I think the proportional is really probably the right answer.
Yeah.
Roberta, do
do
you
we
want us
need
to
to
revote?
revisit that vote and rephrase or do the second vote so that
We're all still here.
We could add
Yeah.
it.
Maybe I'll open up the funding recommendation letter. The
What could the conditional vote, what would the vote be to move money from one category to another?
right?
Maybe while Roberta's bringing that up, I just might think to the collective group here, if we are concerned about permanently appropriating funds to a particular bucket and we want to create flexibility there, we also probably could, as a group, take a vote to move some of the return funds back to the undesignated block. I'm sure. I mean, Roberta would probably have to actually opine on that, but that could be another solution to us feeling concerned about that.
I'm sorry, my mind was in two places and I didn't quite catch what you wanted to take a vote to do.
Well, we need to take a vote to, it sounds like, to move money from one category to another one so that we can properly allocate it to that, within that category. In this case, open space, moving it from the undesignated to the open space. I think, would that satisfy that concern?
Yeah. Oh, am I sharing screen?
The wrong
No,
screen.
we still have the look.
Okay. Oops. Okay, I'm gonna figure out how to stop the share. Sometimes I can't think about two things at the same time. Wait. I don't have to stop the share. I can just, okay, now I have the voted to transfer from the undesignated fund balance.
I guess if you want to be proper about it, you'd make that first, wouldn't you? Of course, we already voted for the other.
We can vote to revise the
The order.
funding agreement, as modified. We want to be really, I think in the past, Roberta, you've done this as two completely separate documents, is my recollection. You pull up
That
one
might
doc,
have,
but I don't know if it matters.
yeah, that might have happened once. I'd have to dig to remember when that happened, because at first we did nothing. We just funded it straight out of the undesignated fund. And
Mhm.
then I was advised not to do that. So then we changed our procedure, and then probably the next year when it came up again, I forgot about the change in procedures. So
Because I think last year we did like the two votes, when we had to move money first, and we,
okay, so I'm gonna look up what happened last year. Recommendations. I'm gonna guess that maybe it happened with, I'm gonna stop sharing for a moment and see if I can find when it would have happened.
it would have, maybe I'm thinking it might have likely been another off cycle thing.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, but I have that table that shows me what account I took things out of. So undesignated fund balance, oh, we only used it for the City Hall clock tower. Okay. So let me look and see if there was something for the City Hall clock tower.
I don't think we did do it for that project. Maybe I'm thinking of a year ago, or, one more year farther, because that seems relatively recent to me.
Nope.
Yeah.
Actually, we did exactly the same thing that we're doing right now.
So you moved it as a clause in the, did we move it first and then vote? Or to vote?
Yes, we moved it. I'll show you so I can copy the language from this version.
That's fine.
Share. So we said you voted to appropriate from the undesignated fund to the Historic Preservation Reserve, and then so
Would you think
that
of a vote to revise it to reflect this structure here?
so I think that we just need a second vote. You've already made this vote. So this was 7-0.
Yeah.
So what you need is to vote to transfer from the undesignated fund to the open space reserve.
So I make a motion to move 200,000 from the undesignated fund to the open space reserve.
I'll second.
All right, I'll call the roll. John,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Heather,
Yes.
Mary Jo,
Yes.
Carlos,
Yes.
Michael,
Aye.
Eric.
Yes.
All right, motion passes. Thank you for bringing that up.
Of course, since we got the order backwards, our check's still going to bounce because I know how banks operate. It was a moment. I don't know why I'm suddenly blurry. Am I showing up as blurred all of a sudden?
You're blurry.
Just changed.
Yeah.
Then.
All right, so were there any other questions or comments about the project status reports?
Thank
I
you
had
for
one.
putting it
Yeah, that's
together.
real. Thank you.
The land designation study was on pause. Is that something that is going to be canceled? Is there a point in time where they will decide that?
So that was a pool of funding that has been set aside to support due diligence study that's needed should an open space acquisition project arise. So say, for example, they need to get an appraisal or to do some kind of the engineering analysis before, or some kind of analysis, due diligence before acquiring the parcel. That's what that's for.
Okay, so that's just their money forever until it comes up.
Essentially, yes. And that was put in place before we implemented the standard condition that they have 3 years or need to come back and explain themselves.
That was we're talking about Art Farm?
No, that was a question about the project, keep skipping over it, to land acquisition fund study.
Oh,
So it's a fund to support land acquisition that's not for the acquisition itself, but for due diligence.
okay, I don't remember that one.
I'll share again and I'll point it out. I didn't ask for an annual report for that because it's really connected to the land acquisition itself. So the land acquisition fund study, this one.
Oh, okay, so it was back
So-
in 2017.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and there's still 37,000 available for that.
so does that mean they haven't done it? Or,
Well, they haven't identified a parcel of land that they want to acquire. They did spend 2,500 because at one time there was a parcel of land that was under consideration and they didn't proceed with that.
so it's not a proactive study. I was assuming that it was like, this was their study to figure out what land might they acquire. This is actually a study to study the land that they might acquire and decide whether to acquire it.
I am not sure. I'd have to go back and see what the application included. I don't recall whether it was specifically tied to a piece of land or if it could have been to help them identify a piece of
Yeah.
land.
But the latter would seem like a really good thing for them to do.
Robert, I also wonder if it's just like before we can acquire a piece of land, we need to do like soil testing and all this other work
Yeah.
that developer technically can just buy the piece of land without doing any of this work beforehand. So
Yeah.
my guess, and I don't really know this application specifically, but my guess is it's a pot of money that allows the city to do this testing very quickly and have that pot of money in hand so that we can do that testing very quickly and act on the parcel in a competitive way.
That would
Yeah.
make sense.
And I have to also call out that sometime after the first award of funds for the Open Space Acquisition Fund, there was a team that was put together to prepare um, a plan or a set of criteria and like an evaluation plan for how the city would consider open space parcels for acquisition. And it's a really thorough and well, I think, articulated document. And so now that I think of it, I ought to also mention that in the plan updates for the open space section. I didn't think of including that as one of the links. So I want that effort to not be forgotten. It's really useful information when we're able to identify open space parcels. All right. Would you like me to move on to the plan update?
I think, no, we're not voting anything here, but there's any other questions about this from the rest of you? I don't have any. In that case, yes, let's move on.
All right. So there were two elements that I included in your meeting packet that are sections of the annual plan update. The results of public engagement and the community needs, goals, and priorities. So I'll begin by sharing the stakeholder engagement and walking through that briefly. It's a long document, but really interesting if you have the time to absorb the information. So in the beginning, I review the different types of public engagement that we've undertaken the past month and over the past year. Includes our annual public hearing last month, tabling at different locations and events throughout the summer and fall of, oh, it should say 24 and 25. You can tell that I did some copying and pasting to help me expedite this report preparation. Surveys were available online and in print and on the Summer Voice page. And over the last couple of months, undertaken interviews, interdepartmental meetings, and an online survey directed to city staff to learn more about ways that we can improve the program. So you are all at the annual public hearing. I won't go through my summarization of what we learned at the annual public hearing.
Before you scroll,
Yeah.
in the first paragraph, it says Wednesday, March 27th. Was it March 26th?
Yes, you are right. It was March 26th. Thank you. And then I describe what I learned in coordination with city staff. Summarized some of the comments that I received through interviews and interdepartmental meetings and the survey that I sent out to city staff. So recommendations to invest in restoration of city-owned buildings before they deteriorate further, especially the Armory, 165 Broadway, City Hall, and the Union Square building. Using historic preservation funding to create multi-purpose community space, especially kitchens, meeting space, youth and teen space, and education and play space are needed. Continuing to invest in parks and open spaces, implementing the open space and recreation plan, enhancing parks with multi-age features, seating, water fountains, and climate change pressure relief. Affordable housing continues to be a high priority, especially permanent supportive housing, veterans, and updating Somerville's Housing Authority inventory. Exploring whether CPA can support on-call contracts to enable more efficient and flexible use of funds. This could especially be helpful for open space and recreation projects, but this is really a legal question that we might need to explore, whether it's possible to change the structure of how CPA funding is used for parks.
Does that mean
Continuing.
like house doctor contracts, that kind of stuff?
Exactly.
Yeah, so it would, an inquiry that I received just a month after we recommended funding for the two projects. It was the Quincy Street open space and the Nunziato Park open space. And the project managers came to me and said one of their projects came in under budget, and the bids came in over budget. Could they just swap money? And no, they can't without going through the whole application process again. So being able to have on-call contracts could make it so that those two projects could be awarded under one CPA grant, and they could use the funds however it was needed. So continue to make application materials easily accessible and consistent with other city programs. I hear a lot of complaints about, not only from the city, but from private applicants, about the onerous reporting and documenting requirements of the CPA program. So I'm trying to streamline it, but I'm also trying to make sure that you and I and the public get the amount of information that we really need to see how the funds are being spent, and that the projects are completing successfully. So it's a careful balancing act. Tabling events. There's a list of all the tabling events that are counted. We got a total of 1,800 votes among all of those events. That is 1,800 stickers that I individually peeled off of those posters. It's but who's counting? And we get really consistent results across the board in terms of the allocation between affordable housing, historic preservation, and open space and recreation. It's really interesting year over year, event over event, that we get very similar results. And we keep trying to, give more information out, help people understand what all of the projects do. And it seems as though it doesn't change the results. So that itself is very interesting. So there's a table listing all of the comments that we received on sticky notes on the posters throughout all of the events. I haven't summarized them, but it's similar to comments that I do summarize below in the next section. So the Summer Voice page it's available year round, unlike the survey, which is only available occasionally. It's only available in English, unlike the survey, which is available in many languages. I don't push it out, but people do occasionally find the Summer Voice page and participate in it. So I got a couple of responses to it this year, and I feel obligated to report on them, even though a couple of responses is really not representative sample by any measure. And the Summer Voice page also is similar to the questions asked in our general survey, our annual survey, but it separates the demographics and the substantive questions into separate surveys so that people don't feel obligated to identify themselves. The online survey was available in 5 languages, 6 languages, or however many, but it was not, we only received responses in English, despite really pushing it out in many different languages. We had a total of 298 responses. That's significantly more than last year, maybe about double last year. And this pie chart shows the wards that are represented here. Starts Ward 1, Ward 2, Ward 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and these little slivers are I don't know and I don't live in Somerville. People who don't live in Somerville are typically taking the survey because they work in Somerville. The distribution of funding falls right in line with what we see in the tabling events, about 49% affordable housing, 33% open space and recreation, and 18% historic preservation. And I do make an effort to summarize comments here because it's overwhelming to read all of the comments. So I'll go through some of these bullet points with you. There's a broad desire to increase the quantity of open space, especially in areas of the city that currently have less. West and East Somerville are most frequently mentioned. Many respondents suggest that they'd like to see more passive green spaces with seating, picnic tables, spaces that offer community gathering opportunities for people of all ages, increasing tree cover, native plantings or forests. Would like to see improvements to existing parks and open spaces, in particular biking and walking paths. Seven Hills Park, Foss Park, Trumfield, and Dilboy are often mentioned, along with the waterfront along the Mystic River and Union Square Plaza. Specific amenities mentioned were public bathrooms, dog parks, pickleball, shade structures, pool improvements, and passive recreation opportunities. Historic preservation, respondents highlighted city-owned buildings they'd like to see improved, with a strong emphasis on restoring City Hall, the Central Library, and the 1895 building, as well as several mentions of the Armory, the Union Square building, and the Walnut Street building, which at one time was a recreation used by the Recreation Department, and the Brown School. Respondents indicate that they would prioritize projects which increase space for community gathering, events, arts, and services.
What's in the Wall Street building now?
It's vacant.
But the
It's
the city still owns it.
Yeah. It's one of a collection of buildings that are on mothballs, as I will show you in the next section of the report that I talked to you. I actually have a picture of the Walnut Street building in that, so you can remember what that looks like. And some preservation and education awareness about Somerville history. Most comments underscore the need for more affordable housing in general, especially housing for families, as well as individuals, people who are unhoused, seniors, and residents of both lower and middle income levels. Some specific strategies supported by residents include building more housing, capturing vacant buildings, repurposing existing buildings to affordable housing, or supporting the Somerville Community Land Trust. And finally, several respondents would like to see an increase in housing supply through higher density development, increased heights, and relaxing building restrictions. That's not really within the purview of the Community Preservation Committee, but I'm just want to share what people took the time to report to us. So I then compared the survey respondents to the general population so that we can have an idea of how representative are they of Somerville residents in general. So the blue column is survey respondents and the orange column is the city population according to ACS in 2023. So very few people, one person under the age of 20 responded. There was a higher proportion of respondents between the ages of 35 and 64, and a smaller share of respondents under 35 or over 65. Household income was actually fairly representative throughout. Fewer people with the very lowest level of income under $25,000, but otherwise it's fairly representative throughout. And I also looked at social characteristics. There wasn't anything that really jumped out at me with respect to social characteristics, except perhaps that respondents were more likely to have children under age 17 in their households than the general population. And survey respondents were more likely to be homeowners than renters. And this just shows, are there people with disabilities, seniors, or children in your household? And these are the none of the above folks in green. Oh, there are two categories of children. So a larger share have children under 10 and a smaller share have children ages 10 to 17. And this is a bit of a work of art. I actually took the time to enter all of the data that we received through the comments into a word cloud. I'm usually not a big fan of word clouds, but we received so many comments that I just wanted to create a way for to help you all be able to absorb what was stated in the comments.
You should make
And
that into a
so,
poster. That's
yeah,
cool.
yeah. So this is the word cloud for open space and recreation. And I didn't just take all of their comments and throw them into the word cloud. I actually went and picked keywords out of each of their comments so that the word cloud would actually only have meaningful words in it, and that I could be able to like variations of words wouldn't throw the count off. I could have some consistency with what was reported. So this is what we heard loud and clear about about parks and open space. And I'll skip down to the 1895 building. I mean, the historic preservation. I just repeated the first word I saw at the top of the page. And affordable housing. So that's what I have for the public engagement. Any comments or questions about public engagement? Anything you'd like to look at again?
That's a lot of work. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd echo that, David. This is this is a big deal, and I know it's going to go a long way to helping guide us with where we steer some of the funds.
So the demographic information is only from the online survey takers, whereas the word cloud incorporates tabling as well as online.
No, the word cloud is only the online survey. I didn't think to put the tabling into the word cloud.
It's very helpful. Thank you so much for all of it.
You're welcome.
Very cool.
So,
Can pull up our agenda.
I'm sorry?
Just digging up my agenda again.
Yeah, that was the part one of the review of the. Sorry, I'm trying to find my notes again.
Roberta, it's very hard to hear you. Is anyone else having that problem?
Yeah,
Yes,
you're
I
breaking
was
up.
assuming it was me. Because it was me last time.
Is it just my volume?
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like your thumb is over the mic.
Yeah.
I think you just might be sitting further away from the mic because it just started to happen.
Oh.
No, it's gotten quirky.
Yeah,
No.
let me know if you can't hear me. Maybe I'll just try to talk louder.
Just yell.
Okay. So I need to get back to my meeting packet, and I wanted to talk about the other section of the plan that I shared with you, which was the community needs. And I will share my screen again, and there's not nearly as much to report about the community needs because this changes incrementally year over year. So this section of the report, begins with overall needs, And this has not changed at all. This is really based on the summer vision and values that have been articulated by the CPC in the past, which I haven't perceived a change in these values. So I would encourage you to review it yourself at some point and let me know if you think that it needs some changes, but this doesn't reflect any changes so far this year. But the open space and recreation section has been updated to reflect the new open space and recreation plan. So this table is new data, different from what was in the plan over the last couple of years under the old space and recreation plan. And there are a few places where the data has been updated. One thing that I did this year that wasn't in previous plans is that these are live links to other plans that are being referenced in our plan. And there's, I've added pollinator action plan, which was completed before, and updated a little bit section about our coordination with other departments and other planning efforts. And the open space and outdoor recreation priorities now are repeating the priorities that are articulated in the space and recreation plan that are relevant to CPA funding.
What were the colors in the map above?
This was taken from our climate
back.
vulnerability assessment. This is taken from the climate vulnerability assessment, and this is outdoor heat exposure. So the areas in red have higher heat exposure.
Thank you.
Yep. And then the historic resources section, I mainly updated the public facilities to reflect what we learned last month from the infrastructure and asset management testimony about the various plans that have informed their planning for city projects. And this is the inventory of buildings that they identified. This one is the Walnut Street building. And then these are the other buildings that had been included. This is the 165 Broadway, the Armory, the Union Square building, City Hall, 1895, Central Library, Edgerly Center, and the field house at Tufts Park, or the that's the Powder House Park field house. The privately owned community spaces hasn't really changed what's on this page. But city partners and planning efforts, I've updated a little bit, especially talking about the collaboration with the Department of Infrastructure and Asset Management and the challenges that they're encountering with funding capital improvements, and listed the community space, listed all of the reference reports that were mentioned in the presentation that they gave us last month. But the historic preservation priorities have not changed, are still the same as last year's. So, oh, and community housing. I thought we'd already covered community housing. So I coordinated with the housing division, updated a little bit of data in this, incorporated some of the projects that we funded most recently into the description of projects that CPA has funded for affordable housing. And at theirs, otherwise I have kept things pretty much the same, other than just trying to keep it up to date. Added a reference to the anti-displacement task force, and then the only change to the community housing priorities was at the suggestion of the Housing Division. I specified who some of the at-risk populations might be, including families, seniors, immigrants, and very low-income households. So that is the community needs assessment.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Anybody have any questions or comments on that?
I don't have any questions. I just reemphasize how helpful this was to read. So thank you again for preparing this as well.
Thank you.
Very thorough. Let's bring back to the agenda. That is our agenda.
Yep.
Anything else
There's-
anyone bring up or add?
There's just one minor small thing that I wanted to bring up, which is that last month we all heard a presentation about the open space and recreation plan update, which is nearing completion. They're about to submit it to the state, but they need letters of recommendation to go along with it. And Allison wanted to ask if the CPC would consent to a letter of recommendation on your behalf. I could ask Ryan to sign if the CPC members would like to give your endorsement of the open space and recreation plan.
I'm in support of that.
Yeah.
I'm also
don't
in
see
support
why
of that, and Roberta, I can help you draft some language one day during work if you want.
Yeah, I'd be very willing to do that. And Allison said she also might be able to share a template so I can adapt that for our committee. So thanks. I'll work on that and ask Ryan to be your representative to sign a letter to include.
Cool. That sounds good.
I have two very quick things. One is that I just want to let you know I'm not going to be able to make next month's meeting. So I just want to make sure that you are aware of that. Make sure you have quorum. And the other was, I also wanted to confirm, I think, Roberta, I asked you about this at the city day thing, but I want to confirm when my term is up so that I can start trying to line up a replacement.
Yeah, thank you for asking. It will be on our agenda in an upcoming meeting to talk about that. I'm just going to open I remember to include the calendar in one of these subfolders.
The terms always end in December or in January or something like that.
Terms always end in December, and I think yours might be coming up this year, but let me just first in June, it's actually on our agenda calendar to start talking about the positions that need to be filled for next year. So I can get back to you about when your position is open, but
Yeah, I mean, June is,
theoretically,
I mean, that's gonna be fine to wait till when you have it on the agenda, but I was just, it was on my mind
yeah.
and I just.
And we'll miss you in May, but you'll be back in June.
I should be here in June, yeah.
Good. Okay.
Are there
All right.
any outreach events that are coming up in the next couple of months that we need to?
So I
Organize
did
on-
not ask for a table at the festival in East Somerville. It has never really been on my radar to ask for a table for that event. That's usually in June. Then in July would be Art Beat, but that's a grueling commitment to make. We would need to have at least 2 people at all times for like a 10-hour day. So I have taken a pass on committing us to be at the Art Beat event. So that means that the next events that I'm aware of begin in September, but sometimes we'll squeeze in a farmer's market in August, September, October. So August, September, October are usually the months when our tabling season is in full swing. So I'll begin probably by the June meeting to prepare a calendar of those events for us to start talking about.
Yeah.
And then-
I know the farmer's market starts in a couple of weeks. I mean, so if you wanted to like break stuff up some more, you could probably do the, so we didn't have like a really busy tabling season.
Yeah, that's true.
Do that sooner.
Yeah.
Although, but maybe it works better if you to do the timing when you're, when you want to have the survey open and things like that. So it's half of one, 6 dozen of the other.
Yeah, we don't usually use the online survey for the summer fall tabling events because I have the survey running in March. So when we do the library tabling events, I have the survey to hand out. But the fall ones, we just do the poster exercise.
So the library tabling is sort of a newer thing that we've been doing, and my sense from the little that I did with you is that they were productive versus some of the farmers market stuff that I've done. I guess they were also somewhat productive, but they were very like
The
drawn
mobile
out.
the mobile markets, we've gotten very small participation levels at the mobile markets. And so I feel like it may not be worth our while to include the mobile markets, but the farmers markets that have been much more engaging have been the Davis Square Market, which they'll invite us to come as often as we want to. They welcome community tables, and it's not terribly like it's the right level of busy. The Union Square Farmers Market, they're very selective. Last year they rejected us. The previous year we didn't get like they were all full up by the time I applied. I couldn't get us a table at the Union Square Market. So I've been able to do it once so far in the time that I've been working here.
Mhm.
Cool. Anything else people want to bring up? Well, we're still all together. Not, I guess we could solicit a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that motion.
All right, I'll call the roll. Mary Jo,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Michael,
Aye.
Heather,
Yes.
Carlos,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
and Eric.
Yes.
All right, thank you,
Thank you.
everyone.
Good to see you.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Wells.
Anytime.
Yeah, everyone.
Bye.
See you next time.
See you next time, couple of times.
Couple time. Yes.
Yeah.